She's got it going.
She's got you.
We see it flashing now, so we are officially recorded. And okay, I have no idea what happened to my mic in there, but something got confused there. So I'm going to share Kieran's screen, and so now is everybody seeing the IAP submit to implement? I bet you are.
Yes. Could you enlarge?
Yeah.
Can you enlarge?
Yes.
For those of us who are older in the room.
I can't read that one, but I have it on my screen.
Look at that. Okay. All right. So I am going to scroll down to the bottom here. Kind of two reasons we're meeting today. The first is that we wanted to take some time to clarify and actually offer a few suggested changes to what has become our new supplemental weighting process. So we're going to talk about that. And then also what we had agreed on before, we're going to meet to do a little bit more practice, a little bit more calibration on doing a weighting review, just in the interest of kind of getting ourselves more calibrated and more consistent. And so we have the two IEPs that you would have seen came through yesterday afternoon that we'll use for an activity at the end of the day to see how close we can come on determining a weighting. So, but we wanted to walk through the weighting process with some clarifications that David and I are suggesting we implement. So here we are in our document. I know you all have this, and the changes have been made in here. We know that kind of on the ground level, we have special education representatives that are sitting with districts, in particularly at times of entitlement, initial and reevaluations. And we know that teachers are submitting, the language we've started using is suggested weightings. So on that RSD tab, we know that they're typically submitting an IEP indicating a level 1, 2, or 3 on there. And we know that our AA staff are sometimes advising and helping our special educators determine what they're going to put in there. But we also know that it's our responsibility as an AA to actually weight IEPs, to validate them, to verify them. And so that's what we're trying to sharpen up our process a little bit this year and get a little bit more consistent in how we do that verification. So we come to this next part where it says, however, as IEPs are submitted, there are certain circumstances where IMS secretaries would conduct a weighting review prior to validation. So when we met last time, we had talked about the fact that we wanted you guys as IMS staff to become a little bit more formal about conducting a weighting screening under certain circumstances. And if you look at our bulleted list here, it has changed since last time. We had a little bit of a longer list of situations where we would say, please do a weighting review when an IEP comes in. And as we talked about that recently, it was a pretty long list. And I think we determined that would have been well over, probably well over half of the IEPs that we were saying, let's do a formal weighting screening. So we've trimmed that down a little bit, and I wanted to walk through the reasons we're saying. So the first one is all initial and reevaluation IEPs. And that's kind of an important one because there was essentially, we know that this process looks a little bit different around the state. Different AAs are handling it in different ways, but a number of years back, there was kind of agreement with the special education directors that at these times of entitlement, child find, so initial evaluations and reevaluations, the AA would validate that the weightings are correct. And so we've left that on our list. So whenever an initial IEP or a reevaluation IEP would come in, we would ask you guys to conduct a weighting review. The second one is left on there from our discussion a few weeks back. If the IEP contains a TA or a PP, so a paraprofessional service. So either it contains that service or that service may have stopped. And kind of the reason for leaving that in there is we have found that There are likely a lot of, I'll just call them mistakes. Schools are sometimes putting in IEPs with suggested weightings that involve a paraprofessional, and sometimes they're inappropriately high or they're just incorrect based on the matrix that we have. So we would like, when IEPs come in that involve a paraprofessional service, we would like that to be reviewed and screened for weighting. This next one, if the weighting has increased from the previous year's IEP, I think the change there, previously we said if it decreased or increased, we're now saying if it goes up. So in other words, an IEP comes in, last year it was level 1, this year it's level 2, we would ask you guys to screen it, to review it for weighting. So if there's an increased weighting, our process will be that we're going to validate that and make sure that it's correct. And then actually, this fourth bullet was added because in some of our discussions, we realized that this next one, preschool IEPs, is a time where there tends to be glitches and sometimes mistakes. So a couple things, so if you have a preschool IEP coming in, there's the issue, is it full or part-time status? I know that's something that we will periodically catch around waiting time. Oops, looks like these students should really be part-time students versus full-time students. So here's a stopping point to say, let's look at that. Transitioning to kindergarten, from pre-K to kindergarten, we know that's often a time where there's a weighting change because we know that our preschool students are always at least level 2, or they may be level 3, just because of the way our system is built. And so sometimes when students transition to kindergarten, that may change. And then also special transportation status, but we're saying particularly with preschool students, preschool IEPs, I should say. So that one, because we see a lot of IEPs coming in with maybe some ambiguous kind of situations. We may have that checkbox checked as attendant, but then the description on page F might not be very clear about what's really happening. Is there really an adult paraprofessional riding to and from school with that student? Does it really mean that? Is it a special route? Are they going from one district to the next? Transportation status for preschoolers we thought would be a good one as well to review. So what we are saying is, in these instances where these 4 bullets, these broad areas, we are saying when these come in, these situations, please do review for supplemental weighting. Okay, so we would ask IMS secretaries to do that. Now here is a change. We're going to tell you there's one thing you don't have to do, so everybody can smile and applaud, because I know you have many things to do. We had, at last time we met, we had made a decision that we would ask you when you're doing these kinds of reviews to upload a copy of the weighting matrix to the web IEP file. We made the decision, we don't think that's necessary. The only, we had kind of gone back and forth on whether or not we should do that previously. One reason we thought about doing it was that it would be a way of documenting, yes, we did these reviews when we said we were going to, but in the end, we felt like that was, additional process and additional electronic paperwork that probably isn't necessary. So in the document before, you saw that there were electronic copies of the weighting matrix, and we had said, when you do these reviews for these bulleted examples, please upload a matrix. We are saying that's not necessary. So conduct the reviews at these times, verify that they are correct, but there is not a need to create and upload a matrix. Let me pause there, and then we'll go on to kind of the next part here. I'm talking a lot. What thoughts or questions do folks have right now?
Like on special transportation, I know there'll be some unclear, it'll read like there's transportation to and from school. Then when you look on page G to get up to the points where they said it was, it's been marked, there's an attendant, but that's not really in the written part on F.
I see that all the time, Sandy, yes.
So, you know, you have to look at G to see for your points. Is that a pending issue that? I
guess, so, you know, you're seeing the same thing that I see, Sandy, because I see that exactly what you described a lot, where I'm kind of left going, I'm not exactly sure what's going on here. I think that is an example. I mean, if you're reading that IEP and you can't tell from the description what really is happening for transportation, and you're trying to determine, you know, to validate a weighting, it may be a case of, you know, contact the district and saying, please clarify. So yeah, I think it is. I think in some cases, if there's not enough information to make that decision, it may just be asking or clarifying. And I
even
don't.
though it's marked G, you know, as an attendant, but it doesn't read that on F.
Yeah, if in doubt of what is happening, an email or a call to the district could clear that up. Yeah, but that for some reason, a lot of districts do that. They check that mysterious box, but from what is written in page F box, we're left wondering what really is happening. Did you really mean that? Just lots of different scenarios, including harnesses and things like that can come up for preschoolers. So if in doubt, ask. And you know, if we ask for clarification for something and it's just a matter of adding a detail, as long as something is not changing in the IEP that's substantially different from what was decided at the IEP meeting, I still view us in editing mode. Does that make sense? We're clarifying, we're adding language that was left out. But if we're ever in a case where the IEP team decided one thing and we're adding something different, that should go up. Should go back for a meeting. It shouldn't be us in the middle making changes. We're only in the business of potentially clarifying and editing. But I think in some cases, Sandy, you know, the answer you might get from that teacher is like, okay, I just didn't make that clear. Here's what's really happening, and that can get cleared up. Okay, so asking you to review for weighting in these cases, but is not necessary to formally complete a matrix and upload it. You know, you'll all have your own work styles on how you're going to do that weighting. Some of you may kind of do that in your head. I know Karen shared with you at our last meeting, you know, she has kind of a little notepad, you know, with some calculations that helps her to jot down the numbers as she's thinking through them. I think you'll all have your different ways, but not asking you to complete a formal matrix. Okay. So those are the cases where you're going to validate the correct weighting before implementing or before validating the IEP. But this next part, the when to send it on, that's we want to clarify that. Clarify and change that process a little bit from where we were before. It's a new process, and we want to do it in the way that's going to be the most efficient and fluid for everybody. So in some cases, you may be looking at a weighting and you may have a question on the accuracy. So kind of two big categories where we're advising you to send that IEP on to be reviewed by either David or I. So number one, if a district proposed weighting will increase, so that's just as simple as if it was level 1 last year, the proposal is level 2, or if it was level 2 last year and the proposal is level 3, do send that one on. Do send that one on to David or I. We'll talk about the how that looks in a second here. Okay, so if it's going to increase, if it has increased, or number 2, if there are questions on the appropriate weighting, pass it on. So in other words, if we want you to be comfortable, and if you're reviewing for weighting in these circumstances, and you you're not sure, or you would like an opinion from David or I on that, we're saying pass them on, and we can review. So if it increases, or if there's a question on appropriate weighting. And the way David and I are kind of dividing this is right now we're looking at David taking the East region and the West region, tagging on Iowa School for the Deaf. That's a gift, isn't it, David, to have Iowa School for the Deaf added on, because there's nothing confusing.
It is a gift. It is a gift. It keeps on giving.
There are some cleanup things that probably need to happen in Iowa School for the Deaf, and so we'll tackle those things as we go along. And then I would take the North and the South regions. Okay, so just kind of dividing up, where it's, so depending on the district, that's who it would be passed on to. Okay. Now, how do you pass that on? We had there was a form created. Karen had created a form, and our original intent was to use a Google form where that request for review would come in centrally, and we worked through that for a few weeks. The decision was to change how we do that. So we're gonna rather than everything coming in centrally. We think probably the most fluid way to do this is if you guys, as IMS staff, are going to pass on these requests directly to David or I, depending on the district. Okay, and how would we like you to do that? We're saying when you guys do reviews, it's not necessary to fill out a matrix. But if one comes to David or I for validation, it's usually going to be either tricky ones or controversial ones, possibly, or ones where maybe the district bumped it up and we're going to bump it back down. So we would like a documentation that we did that, and kind of the reasons for that to be there. So we would want a memo in place about what happened. And so if you look in your document here, there are some. Karen put together some template shells, and I'll just open one for you. So there's ones that are kind of partly pre-filled if they're going to David, and then some that are partly pre-filled as if they were going to me. So if I open one of these shells, you will see something like this. And so it's not the matrix, but you can see obviously it's the areas from the matrix over here. How many points would be allocated there, and then some comments. And even you can see over in the comments, there's even kind of some sentence stems there, kind of put together. Karen kind of put those in there to be a time saver, hopefully, because the comments can often be small sections lifted from the IEP as far as the reason for the points there. And then we get a total calculated from there. And so this would serve as a memo that would be documenting, hey, we've reviewed this and here's what's been decided. So instead of you sending through a form a request for this, we would ask you, if it's going to go on to David or I, we'd ask you to actually pre-fill, to actually draft this memo with a narrative with the points in there, and then send it on to either David or I, and we would review and either validate it, say, hey, you were right, I agree with you, or we might offer some suggestions or some changes, but then we would send back to you, what would be the complete memo. And then that would be a case where that would go out to the appropriate district contacts, the teacher, the coordinators, all the relevant people. It would go back to those folks, and we would like this uploaded into Web IEP as a document. Okay, because again, not thinking we need the matrix uploaded for these kind of, I could say maybe routine weighting reviews, but for ones where we're making a change or potentially dropping them, if it comes to David or I, we're saying, let's create this memo, issue it out to the districts and saying, here's what we think, here's what we decided, and then we would archive that in Web IEP.
As a PDF.
Yes, so it's unchangeable, right, Johnny?
Right, right. You need to save it as a PDF and
Yes.
upload it that way.
Yes. Okay, let me pause there for questions you have so far. But then you can see this link up here, use of the memo guidance. I'm going to ask Karen, do you want to come out here and use the operating computer? But this is a guidance document that Karen put together. The memo template that we're talking about is it's similar to a format that I've used for a number of years. Other people have used something similar. I know Joe Warchek had, and so there's kind of some guidance in here on how you might complete that memo. And I was going to ask Karen to go ahead and kind of talk us through that. So because there are some kind of clear examples now. Yes.
Ron, before you move on, just thinking about the preschool one, that first bullet under preschool IEPs,
Yes.
that's more of a just a check. That's more of a checkpoint for them. Is it part-time or full-time? That first bullet. That's more of a checkpoint, whereas the other two are actually digging a little bit deeper. Well, transitioning to.
Yes, I mean, I know what you're saying, David. Yeah, I mean, this is either it is or it isn't. But I think we were the thinking was when we talked was we're gonna screen these because these are some of the issues that sometimes make the weighting confusing.
Right. So it's a think about, just like transition to kindergarten would change things. So it's to think about.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Sorry. Thanks for listening to me think out loud.
Bet. So, okay. Trade places here.
Hi, Steve. There's a flow chart here, if you can read.
Okay.
From those notes. Isn't that scary? From the notes that were up there.
Okay, so I just want to explain about the use of weighting memo guidance. Okay, so what I did is I broke down each of the two memos. It is quite descriptive, and it's just basically as you do it, you're not probably going to have to look at it that much, but it's just there in case you have a question. So one of the things we want to make sure is the recommendation is for IMS secretary to send an email to the director 1 time per day. What that means, if you get 5, 6 kids in a day that you might have a weighting matrix, you can only imagine the amount of emails that would be a cross between Ron and David, but that Ron and David get every day. And we're just trying to help them not get overloaded with all the memos. So make a list, get them all the memos done and then send them out to Ron and David once a day. What we do ask though, if there is a rush needed, absolutely go ahead and get that sent as soon as possible. And please indicate in the email that you want that there is a rush and you would like them to look on it as soon as possible. All right. So what we did is I took in the orange snippets, the very first one, the top of the memo, in italics is just saying what should be included on the top of the memo. All right. Basically, those are the individuals that we're going to send the memo to once it's completed, but we're going to go ahead and fill that in so that Ron and David have all that information and so that memo is done. We don't need to put that information in italics on the actual memo. I just did that to give proper attention to it, I guess, if you want to say it that way. Under planning and preparation, that is the very first box that's on the memo. And we did, like Ron said, we included some sample things. The very first one is if there is more than 2 goal areas, you can write that out or add that to the end of that message. Or if there's only one goal area, you can use the bottom one. You do not have to keep both of them in that box. Just pick one that is applicable. In page 2, you'll notice that I went ahead and included some samples that we've used on other memos so that you can kind of see it. So what I've done through the whole document in each area, I included what the area looked like in orange, and then I tried to include samples. As you go down, like with specially designed instruction, you will also see that I included a formula in there as well to compute it, just to help, to assist you in computing what the percentage would be. So I've included that in here. Obviously, what for us, for specially designed instruction, what's included in the percentage is what would equal the points that would go in the points column. For specially designed instruction, you will want to include that percentage in the description. Is there any questions so far?
I think it's important to make sure that it's the total SDI, not just the pullout. So
Yep.
you can't just always go by the percentage that's on Form F.
And that is why you use the formula right there. Because that formula would include, it may not match up with the LRE percentage. Good point, Joni. So if we go down to health, physical, or behavior, remember that's referring to the paraprofessional. And once again, I did include a formula there that would help and assist. Notice that I did include a ratio. Obviously, some of them are not going to have a ratio, but it does help in determining the appropriate amount of time the child is with an associate. If it's not included, you would leave that blank on the formula that's there. If you scroll further down, again, we have the comments. One thing I want to point out is what we do. The box is already filled with, the IEP indicates that. And then in parentheses, what we're asking is anything that's copied from an IEP. So on PPO, TAO, transportation, sometimes assistive tech, support for school personnel, we're going to pull directly what's on the IEP into the shell. So to do that, make sure you're italicizing it and put quotes around it. That will assist Ron and David. It will also assist the school that gets it to know where we got that information from. Also, the one thing on PPO and TAO is we're going to add that last line that says this equates to approximately, on this sample, it says 100% of his day with a paraprofessional. Where did I get that percentage from? I got it from that calculation above. Okay? So if you go down to TAO, it's similar to what the PPO is. It's just a different area. Included a formula in there too. Showed what it was, and then showed a sample of what it is. For this particular sample, it's showing this equates to approximately 4% of her day with an associate.
So what would Ron or David want us to put in there if the IEP has a PPO and it says the student will have access to a classroom associate for 2 hours a day?
And that is where a ratio really helps out, for one. Because that way you know, is it a 1-to-1 para? Is it a 1-to-2 para? And so forth. But I will let Ron and David talk here. Well, Ron can't. David, I guess it's you. Unless Ron wants to run out here and grab my speaker.
Go ahead, make your comment.
CB does not use a ratio on the para or TA.
That was one conversation I did have with Lori back in June. Was that a ratio was really helpful, because when I reviewed some of those, I feel like I'm hearing myself, is when I reviewed one of the school districts in May to help out. That was one thing that was so hard to determine, was the ratio. And that was really helpful when I did get a ratio as to determining the appropriate weighting for that child. So I do think that that is a training issue that should probably take place with Council Bluffs.
Yeah, because she was here and I questioned about that, and she said they've never used that. And she said, I guess it's something that I need to have discussed with me if there needs to be a change.
Is that, because just clarification for myself too, because you brought that to my attention in June as well, and it does make sense to have that ratio in there. Is that something that is a mandatory thing, or would it just really help them with getting accurate weightings? because I think it would help. I'm just trying to see with some of the changes in CB where they're going to put their weight in mandating some of that. But if we take the stance that it needs to be in there, then I just want to make sure I reinforce that.
We're gonna have to have a conversation because this runs counter in Glenn's mind to what he's trying to accomplish.
Okay.
So, because you think it's related to they're trying to get rid of one-to-ones. And so they've gone to this whole make one available. So
Yeah.
how much time does this kid have available to him is gonna affect your weighting, Glenn.
Right.
How do we work this out?
Yeah.
So.
Because she says it's not used, and she said before count, I don't think we can get something out to people. And I says, well, this is something you need to discuss.
I just put it on our agenda for a conversation with them the next week in the very near future.
I think kind of the practical aspect of it is, I mean, if the description of the para says something like just there's someone available, or if we know if it sounds like just sort of a classroom para, well, if it's truly just a classroom para, there's just someone there. It may not even belong on the IEP, period. But I mean, we can kind of presume that para is there in part, you know, for this student. There's a reason that they're hired to help them, even though it may be a larger ratio. But if we don't know how much time that para is spending with the student, it probably defaults to, well, you'll never get more than 1 point on that category. Does that make sense? You know, so because of the percentage of the day that a para service would be available. So if it's a classroom para or a large ratio, more than maybe about 1 to 2, you're never going to get more than 1 point on that matrix. But so I think sometimes we
By the time they put down, I don't know how else.
Ask that out loud, I think.
I just go by the minutes that they put down, because there's never a ratio, and sometimes it's you can't tell. So that's how I've concluded.
So if, but see, and that, I mean, that is tricky, because if, in other districts, I mean, I think try to do the same thing, Sandy, but if the IEP says that Johnny has access to a para 420 minutes a day, and they get 3 points, we're going to have this huge group of kids getting level 2s and level 3s when it's probably not appropriate, so.
I guess I'm not trained well enough to know for sure. I mean,
So are you wanting us, if there is not a ratio on an IEP, are you wanting us to email the teacher to get a ratio?
If it's, if there's not enough information to be able to validate a weighting, we need to get that information, in my opinion.
I'm sorry.
I mean, the only other alternative is, I mean, and we, so if it just says Susie has access to a para for, 3 hours a day, I mean, we can just say, well, 1 point, there's some kind of a vague para service going on, and we'll give you 1 point. But I mean, if districts are expecting that to be 3 points because there's access to some adults somewhere all day, that's I think where we run into problems. I mean, we also have other problems. I mean, we have a couple districts that put frankly, kind of silly things on there, like Susie needs a para for 12 minutes a day,
Right.
to do study skills. And what does that mean? What it means is, boom, they get a point, and along with collaboration points, what used to be level 1 students can quickly become level 2 students. I mean, that's kind of what that means. So clarity is the key, I think.
And to me, access to a classroom para is 0 points, because that's a classroom para. That's not a student para.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, if the word classroom para were in there, yeah.
And I guess if I had a serious question on how many points this para is worth, I would return it and ask for clarification, because the only way to get the clarification documented is for them to update what's on the IEP. That's how I.
How frequent is that? And I just asked that because I know in almost all my buildings they had transitioned to the access para verbiage. Is that something that teachers are being communicated with at like IEP trainings and things, or how do we adjust that instead of one by one? I wonder, is that possible?
So Stephanie opens up the can of worms that we've been read. No, you're fine.
Okay.
So that everybody needs to know, we don't have a system or a process for weighting, period.
Mm-hmm.
We have a system in place for review.
Okay.
We don't have the upfront training. And so that's one of the charges that we have, we being Ron, Karen, Joni, and myself primarily, figuring out what training needs to be done where. And I'm going to ask about Council Bluffs along the way because we know Council Bluffs is special.
Yeah.
They do things differently. And so we're going to need to figure out which training too. So and there's this balance between giving them what information about what we need to see in an IEP to be able to weight it, and not giving away the store and say, here, if you want a level 3, this is what you need to write.
Right.
So there's some degree of professionalism we need to trust is going to be there, while also providing professional development around what does the language need to look like, what do we need to have descriptors about, and that's primarily for staff in the schools and special ed coordinators. I can see our sped reps helping some by knowing some of the language. I don't want them doing the weights. I want to propose, when Ron used a word earlier, I want to propose weight coming in from the school district saying, this is what we propose, and then they've gotten all the good language in it. So we have a lot of upfront professional development we need to do that we just have not done. And I think that answers the issue you were raising.
Yeah. So right now, kind of what I'm hearing, the best bet is to, as they come in, just address it.
Right.
Okay.
And if we're seeing a particular pattern, it could be something that I could go in and talk with Glenn about, or you could go in and talk with somebody about.
Or any district, or the field director could even,
About this later, because they all come in like that.
Yeah.
And Lori said, this will be a problem.
Right. Well, I think
if there needs to be a ratio or the wording, we've gotten away from that. And she says before count, how do we change all this?
I think we will talk about that Wednesday.
It's on the list.
Yeah.
Yes. Do we just go ahead and process them for now?
As best you can. Yep. Sorry to get sidetracked there, guys.
Who invited me?
I think Saudi did.
I'm trying to think, well, I got you.
Ron, where are we?
Okay, so is everybody, as far as, I know we have some of these issues out there, but as far as the process and expectations of, when you do a review and when you would send something on to David or I, does everybody feel comfortable with kind of what we're proposing as some changes to what we worked through a few weeks ago? I'm seeing combination of silence and mild nodding. So I'm thinking that.
So Ron, just so let me check my understanding. So there are a number of cases that they will review and just fix themselves, and they don't need to do this memo. But there are other ones where they feel like they need support from you or me, where that requires a memo. Is that kind of the cut?
Exactly. That's just those two. So there's a list of things when you do your review. If everything, if you review them, you feel comfortable validating them, you do. You move on. It's just those two, the 1 and 2 there. If it increases, send it to us. Or if you have a question about the accuracy and you want us to look at it, you send it to us. So with that, and with us playing computer audio switcheroo here, we wanted to, we had sent you a couple of IEPs. We wanted to go through 2 IEPs, give everybody a few minutes to evaluate them on their own, and just have a conversation on, what do we think the weighting is, and just some continued practice on kind of calibrating how we would assign weightings. So Karen, you're on. I think I have in my tabs. Can you share screen with one of our IEPs? Susie Snodgrass, perhaps. I think I have that open on my tabs.
Yep, I see it up there.
Hey, gang, there is a tornado. Our sirens
dear.
are going off in town.
Oh no.
So our whole office is going to the basement.
Okay, we're recording.
So, all right.
Or
right,
just
started.
just take your
Stay
computer
safe.
with you.
Yeah. Okay.
Be safe. Be safe. Bye.
All right.
Karen, can you hear me? Okay. Could you change to Susie Snodgrass? There should be a tab up there on top of my computer instead of sharing the process doc.
You share an IEP with me that has that paraprofessional language.
Yes, I can.
Can everybody access on their computers? The links that I sent you yesterday, they were Google Doc format. Can you go ahead and go back to your email and those links that I sent you and open up Susie Snodgrass, and then we'll put, and so I'd like everybody to review that one. Just review it on your computers. We'll kind of gauge our time here. Let's take a few minutes, just review through it. Jot some notes down, see what weighting you would assign, and then we'll come back together and we'll talk through any differences we have. Yes. Yes. Well, I don't want to rush people, but do we have enough time for kind of a scan? Could we talk through together? We have a couple people in the tornado shelters, and it's coming down pretty hard here too. But let's just kind of talk through our Susie Snodgrass example here. So we've got we happen to have a reeval IEP, 6th grade girl, and so maybe if we just kind of walk down the matrix. So for planning and preparation, looking at number of goals, how many points did people want to assign?
I have 1 or 2 goals.
Okay, everybody agree? I mean, that's usually a pretty straightforward area. And you know, if when a student gets to 3 or more goals, that's when we move to 2 points, and so that jumps up, and then getting up to 3 points. That's our students that are the most involved. In other words, our alternate assessment students that have an adaptive curriculum. So yes, Susie would have 1 point. Kind of I was going to say unspoken, but something about the goal area one, just to remember, I don't think applies here, but the goal count would be goals that are the responsibility of the special education teacher. So in other words, when there's speech goals, OT, PT, we don't count those, and the reason is because the supplemental weighting is, you know, reflecting funding going to the schools. Okay, but for Susie, we know she had a math goal and a behavior goal, and so 1 point there. How about, okay, second category, SDI delivered by a licensed teacher. How many points? And just a reminder, and this happened a number of years ago, extra emphasis was given to SDI, and so the points were proportionally raised. So you can see it goes 2, 4, and 6. So a heavier weighting, if you will, for the SDI. So amount of instructional time. How many points would you see for Susie?
2.
I'm hearing 2 points. Is anybody any disagreement?
Nope, that's what I got.
Okay. And so looking at, you know, glancing at page F, we had 30 minutes a day of STI math, 160 minutes per day of small group behavioral kind of SDI. Both of those were in a special education setting, but that's the SDI, and so you get when you look at the number of minutes per day, that comes out at about 49% of the day, and so that would be 2 points. Now that said, will some districts find it frustrating that they were just a tiny fraction away from getting 4 points there? Probably yes. But that's kind of a good example where this student was right on the cusp of almost jumping to that 4 point there, you know, if they spend half or more of their day receiving SDI. Okay. Category 3, health, physical behavior support. Points there.
One.
I heard 1. I agree, and why?
That figure out 47%.
Well, the para was helping with transitions, weren't they, and those kinds of things? Wasn't that mentioned in there?
Mm-hmm. You know, it goes on to say has a low student-to-staff ratio and will have additional support to help her with behavior issues that may arise. Associates will assist in implementing her behavior plan and keep her safe when
There
she
you
attempts
go.
to elope or help or harm herself. Associates will also help assist in adapting material to help her with academic work. So if you look at 160 minutes per day and you look at a 390-minute day for the student, so that's 41% of the day. So then we are 1 point there, but I mean, this is also an example of where could that be clearer yet? I think it could. That one doesn't say a ratio, but I mean, look at how they're phrasing it. Associates will. So they appear to be describing almost like a pool of associates that are helping the student when needed, but it's only happening for 160 minutes per day. So we can presume that that's you know, maybe certain classes or certain parts of the day where an associate is available. But to me, that doesn't, you know, I don't know what everybody else thinks, but that doesn't read like a one-to-one para. And so we could take the spin of, you know, no matter what, we wouldn't give more than 1 point for that para. Does everybody agree with that? Does that
written?
say again, David?
Just going by the time.
The way it's currently written, I would agree. Right.
Right.
It's one issue, but yeah, we wouldn't expand it beyond that because it's not very clear.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know,
See, that's what Dorothy and I are familiar enough with.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Never been trained in.
Okay. So the para was on there. What about specialized transportation? How many points would we allocate there? Maybe a trickier one here.
Yeah, it reads like a 1, but when you look at G, they've got marked special route and attendant. So until you straighten that out,
It reads like a 2, doesn't it?
well, or a 1.
Well, but on G,
Requires, well, special transportation to and from, if that's just to the school.
but as you said on G, it's got the
Yeah.
attendant thrown in too. Yeah.
So if you look at the descriptor for 3 points on specialized transportation, so it's transportation to another district or within district special route and attendant.
Yeah.
Or specialized vehicle. So kind of these and/ors in there. So I think you're right, Sandy. You know, those 2 check marks make me want to say 3 points. However, you know, I think, why didn't they just add a sentence to clarify that on page F so that we would know exactly what's happening? You know,
Special route and attendant.
Yeah.
So Ron, help me understand number 3 then.
3 points for transportation.
School attendance.
Right.
So they get a point
So-
for that. Like when they go to VODAC.
Yeah, I was thinking about it different. I was thinking about it wrong. I was thinking about you get 1 point because you got a special route. You got another point because it's an attendant. Add them up, you got 2 points. But that's not the way that works.
No, it's moving up the continuum.
I'm getting educated as we go along. I'm good. I disagree. I'm good.
So if we tally the points that I think we're mostly agreeing on here, we get 7 points, and so that's level 2.
Mhm.
So probably the but you can see, and so that's that's right there in that level 2, that 6 to 9 point area. But what about that transportation? What if that really just meant, oh, it's really just a within district route? I mean, we'd be moving down closer to yeah. I mean, if that transportation, if there's really not an attendant and it's just within district route, then this kid could become a level 1 kid. So that's those are the kinds of issues we come across. But for me, I'd read this one and I'd come up with level 2, kind of wishing that there was a little bit more clarity in describing the para and the transportation. But in some cases, I really can't tell what's going on at all. So then that's when we would have to ask. So. Okay, so that's Susie. What if we can we look at Sammy? Sammy Spied.
Mhm.
If everybody wants to grab or find their link for that one. And let's just take a few minutes to peruse and see what we come up with. It is really pouring here in Avoca.
There was a tornado spotted in Red Oak. I have texted Carrie.
Wow.
I'll keep you posted.
Mm.
I think that cell has moved north and east of there now, but I don't know where the tornado was.
Okay. Am I rushing, folks, or did everybody get a chance to take a good scan there?
Another minute.
Okay, you bet.
not very sure about AT either. Oh, it's Chromebook.
There's a mention of a Chromebook.
On AT. I don't know what to do about on AT.
And I wonder if that's not just that. All kids
It
get
doesn't.
now.
It doesn't list AT.
Were you finding something?
Oh.
Sally?
I was just looking at, they talked about the Chromebook available on it. I put 0, and then I didn't know about the Chromebook, if that's like part of a laptop or.
No, that's under accessible instructional materials. It's not under assistive tech.
What'd she say?
It's under accessible materials.
It's not under, what did you say, Joni?
AT.
It's not under assistive technology. So I guess I wouldn't have even probably noticed that.
And I read that Chromebook like that's what everybody has.
Hey, yeah. Accessible instructional material. I had 0, and then I put.
Well, hey, let's start with that one, because that's an interesting one to talk about, because I would agree that there wouldn't be points for assistive tech on this one, but it is interesting. They notice on page B, which is page 2 here, they kind of some of these inconsistencies you see. They say no assistive tech is needed. And it also says, does this student require accessible instructional materials? They say no. They check no, but then, oddly enough, they added a box. Now, if they had checked yes, that AIM box should have popped up and made them fill it in, but they apparently add one there. Let's see. At times for each class, student may require access to audiobooks, resources throughout Bookshare, and educational resources apps that are available on his Chromebook. So this is actually wasn't even a point that I was thinking about, but I mean, I guess I agree with what I heard you guys saying. This is probably a 1-to-1 Chromebook. Everybody has a Chromebook. Everybody has access to these things. And also, did they have to expend anything, any funds to get things? You know, Bookshare, for example, is free service for eligible students. Many apps that they have on their Chromebook are not going to cost anything extra. So, but here's one that, in a way, does kind of leave us guessing. You know, we might have a question about this one, or maybe the district was thinking they would get a point for this. So they actually kind of beat the system on this one, where they didn't check the box, but they threw in AIM anyway. Just one example that I've come across. Sometimes when, I mean, there are more and more students using Bookshare and things like that through their device, and sometimes their device is the same one that's provided to everybody. So again, you know, is that special? No, that's just general education equipment. But I can think of some kids that, for example, maybe they have a Chromebook like everybody else, but maybe their district purchased for them Google Read and Write, you know, which costs a couple $100, I think, for a year. If they did that and they articulate that under assistive technology or possibly under AIM, that would probably be worthy of a point. So this one kind of leaves us guessing there, because they didn't check the right boxes, frankly. But So let's wade through the rest of SAMI. How about category 1, planning and prep? How many points would you give?
2.
Everybody, I see
2 points for 3 goal areas.
three again, goal areas versus goals, right? You know, there may be several for literacy, there may be several for math, but 3 goal areas, so absolutely. So that'd be a 2 point. And then specially designed instruction, how many points are we thinking for SDI?
Did you find 2?
I don't want to say.
2?
I think 2 is it. So I mean, we can look here on page F. We've got the first chunk here, which is behavior, 150 minutes per week. And that is in a special ed setting. We also have 90 minutes for math, and that is in a general ed setting. Okay, and then we have 30 minutes in a special ed setting for reading. And again, the interesting things that you say, they've said 30 minutes in a special ed setting, but down here they also talk about co-teaching. So that leaves me a little bit confused there, frankly, but no matter what setting, right, the minutes count towards SDI. Everybody agree? Whether it's a general ed setting or a special ed setting. So if we do all the math for that, that's gonna come up to about 12% of the day. Student is getting SDI, and so that's clearly going to be in that 2 point range. All right. 3, health physical behavior support. So we do have here we have our paraprofessional listed on there, 400 minutes per day. And it says student will have a 1-to-1 paraprofessional, and then it goes on to say the role. How many points would you give for that category?
3.
I think that's
I'm
a
with
clear.
Tom.
Yeah, I think that's a clear 3 because I mean they say it right out. It's a 1-to-1. You know, 400 minutes out of a 435 minute day, so about 92% of the day that para is attached to the student. And again, you know, nobody's implying that that's what all kids need, but the way the weighting matrix is looking at it is how much direct time is provided during the day. So that's easy when it's a 1-to-1. We don't have to do much math there, so that would be a 3-pointer. And so we have our we total those up, and we get 8 points. And so 8 points is going to be level 2. So I think we're probably all agreeing with that. However, if you look back here, what do the districts submit? Level 3. So there's an example of where we would have to have a review, and there would presumably be a memo coming from David or I saying we reviewed this and it will be recorded as level 2. Anybody have any theories about why the district thought that was level 3?
Because they didn't look at it.
Huh?
So I have, when they come into me like that, I typically reach out to the SPED coordinator or the teacher and ask them if that's what they want before I send it on. And 9 times out of 10, they say, oh no, I forgot to change it.
That's what I do.
And that could be the case because I see they ended some SDI, they ended some teacher associate, and they ended transportation. So that could be what happened.
2, 3.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say what was just said. I mean, that to me, that's totally fine. If just something like that can be cleared up, you know,
No, we always said,
not speaking for David, but I think we would agree. We don't have a burning desire to have that come to us if that can be cleared up with just a phone call, and they say, "Oops, just forgot."
Amen, brother.
Okay.
Amen. Hey, Ron,
Awesome.
So
Ron, I want to debate with you about support for school personnel. Tell me
Okay.
your thinking about.
On this.
Did you give that one a 1? Support for school personnel?
No.
Okay, you said you had 8. I'm not sure how you came up with 8.
Oh, actually, you know what? No, that's a good debate. I believe that's a 9. I didn't. Yeah, this. Okay, so let's see here. Let's pull it up.
I wonder how you came up with an 8. Where did you give it? Where were the points given? Which categories?
2 for goals, 2 for SDI, 3 for the para, and actually, I
1 for collaboration.
yeah, that's the one that I missed there, and I agree. So okay, so here it is. Support for school personnel. So they say. Well, they say special educators, paraprofessionals, and essential staff. Oh, okay. Let's pause here, though. So maybe this is the will be trained in CPI or similar de-escalation and nonviolent crisis intervention strategies in order to ensure safety. That one is okay. That's annually, and that's but this one, the bottom one here, up to 2 hours. We don't like it, but up to 2 hours per month. General educators, paras, and special educators will collaborate on instructional and behavioral supports needed to provide the student with access. So I agree.
You're not agreeing with me if you're going to give it a 1. What I smell on that one is, we may get together, we may not. But is it definitely 30 minutes a week?
Well, that's a good issue to bring up, though, because I'm looking at the matrix here, and well, the truth is I kind of missed it totally there, but now the description of a 0 is non-committal descriptions such as needed or a special ed teacher available is not described, so the dreaded as needed or up to sounds suspiciously like a 0 there, but a 1 says if there's a clear ongoing commitment to support, meaning the teachers are getting together, collaborating, and it can be as little as 30 minutes per week, but I know back when we had the matrix training, a couple years back, the best way I heard it described to me that made sense to me is it something that would appear on a calendar, where Ron's a teacher and he knows that every Tuesday morning at 8 a.m. there's a collaboration meeting for Susie or for Sammy. That's worthy of a point. But if it's more along the lines of, I'm sure, certainly, we'll talk to each other at least 30 minutes a week, right? As complex as Sammy is, that's kind of non-committal. So it's a good example. So does this one deserve a 1 or a 0 on that one?
What did others give it? Sandy, you would have given it a 1. Sandy?
Mm-hmm.
I did a 1, David, and that's how probably 90% of mine come in. It's very similar.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I would give it a 1 because it's basically saying they will collaborate.
The strong language you're looking for as well, and Faith gave it a 1.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And I probably would too, had I not just glossed over it this time. I probably would have given it a 1, even though I sometimes read ones like that and say that's pretty wimpy. I'd like it to be clearer and more committed, but I would say this is not that uncommon. I think we'd see quite a few that look like this one.
Okay.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Very windy.
But I'll also say that then we have, some kids, if they have a little bit of para time and boom, get that 1 point, and a little bit of collaboration time and boom, get that 1 point, it's much easier for kids to sneak up to level 2. And that may be okay, but that is a reality, since this matrix changed a couple years back. I think it allowed that creeping towards level 2 for more kids. And, you know, if the service is really there, you know, that's a good thing. But if it's, you know, when we get these kind of non-committal kinds of explanations, you know, it makes us a little bit nervous. So if we gave the point for collaboration, David, you're right, that would be 9. So we'd still be at the top of level 2. And then I go back to, you know, just why these things can be controversial sometimes. The district submitted this as a level 3. What if they were thinking, I think I deserve a point for that assistive tech, which I feel like the way it's written right now, I don't think it should get that one, but that may have been what they're thinking. And so
I'm getting 8 points even with that collaboration though.
You're right. You're right.
2
I
for
think
goals, 2 for SDI, 3 for the PP, and 1 for the collaborations. 8.
no, you're right. David, did you get 9?
No, I got 8.
Okay. All right, we're back to 8. Okay. Anything else about Sammy? Okay. Crystal, we're glad you made it back from the basement. Must be okay there. Okay, so actually we were kind of scheduled to stop at 4 here. We've gone a little bit over here, so I want to respect your time, but I think we can end there. But just again, a little bit more practice on waiting, and I think every time we do that, we see more examples that can be gray, but probably that issue of the paralanguage being fuzzy is probably the most problematic thing that we have going right now. And so I think as we maybe go through this process and we're looking a little bit more closely at some of those, the hope is we can move towards more consistency. As far as what David talked about earlier, as far as, you know, the balance of, do we need training for LEA folks without giving them the script of what to put in, you know, for level blank. I think we do need, you know, to do some training out there. I think, David, I think we're thinking at our next coordinators meeting that might be a good first step, to spend a chunk of that time going through some of these kinds of things. The difficulty is, you know, how confident we are that will trickle down, you know, to our teachers and practitioners. But I think that might be a good starting point to bring up some of these issues that we're talking about.
Yep. Yeah, we need to get together and plan what we're going to do. Joni had some ideas about communicating some things out and stuff too.
Okay.
So I think there might be a multifaceted approach we have to use.
Okay.
Hey, Ron, So while we get this August group together, just one more minute. Sandy put this question out to us about assistive tech.
Yes.
It says the district will provide for the cost of maintenance, repair, replacement of the HAT device and accessories as needed. And I think you and I gave different answers. I think you thought that was a yes, and I thought that was a no because of the as needed language.
Mm-hmm.
Because they could do that every year and get a point every year.
Yes. Yes, they and you know, a couple of years ago, I know when things drifted a little bit away from we used to have the old mysterious, hey, we'll bump it up 1 year to buy a hearing aid, or we'll bump it up 1 year to buy an amplification system. Well, that kind of went away, and then the language changed in here, and it was, you know, so I mean, on the matrix, you know, it specifies year of purchase or year of expenditure, but it does talk about maintenance of previously acquired equipment. And on the back of the matrix, there's this statement that I always, you know, it says when an IEP is weighted, it's weighted if there's any special education activity, service, or support described in the IEP that creates an expense for the school district. And when that, I remember when that sentence first came out, I know there it was said one time that even if that means replacing the batteries every year in hearing aids, I mean that at one point that was kind of out there. Or what if a district has a high-tech, high-priced amplification system, and what if they purchased a maintenance contract, to keep that up? That would be an expense. So, yeah, I know what you're saying, David. The as needed, but I get it. We might have people debating about, is it presumed that there will be at least some expense to maintain that equipment? Yeah, I know that those are tough ones, but
Yeah, I think that would be the question. Are you actually expending funds, or we may have something this year? Well, a may doesn't seem to me to rise to the level of getting a point. May seems like that's too wishy-washy. You don't know. It's almost like the conversation we have, when do you count a kid? Well, there's Bud has to be in a seat. And this doesn't rise to that standard, I don't think.
But I don't know how because I know when this first came out, Jennifer Backaroo and I was really discussing it a lot, and what training she had was, I said, well, is it like you get it for 1 year and then, that's it?
Right.
She said, no. She said, they put this in here because a lot of the places have, equipment that costs a lot and blah, 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 blah. And I says, but there's lots of years they don't have any expense.
Right.
And she goes, well, they're allowed to use that. And that is what she was saying. And that's what, ISD is, now going, is this really right? We're kind of told we can do this and this will give us a level.
So maybe, Ron, that's one we need to talk about as we provide training. I think we'll go with what you gave it, Ron, because you're the voice I'm still learning. So I get to ask a lot of questions.
Well, it's a gray area.
It is.
Yeah, it is, and I know it seems like it seems kind of wishy-washy, like it's just a way to get some money every year that's not really costing you. But on the other hand, if this student is level 1 for years and years and years, when the time comes and they have to make up a number, $8,000 for a high-tech new piece of equipment, they're still going to be a level 1. We're not. It's you see what I mean. So they've been receiving funds for this maintenance level. Yeah. So I do know they did. The matrix. That maintenance concept was put in there purposefully, and at one time, it was talked about that example. That seems like a silly example, but it was out there just in conversation, at least maybe at some of the trainings, that even if that means buying new batteries, type of a thing.
Okay.
And if it breaks, you're not going to get paid more, but some years the maintenance might be very minimal and you get a little bonus. It's a weird way of thinking, but I know the intention was to get away from, you bought it this year and that's it. The one-time bumps were really supposed to be a thing of the past, because that was a tradition in a lot of the AAs over the years to do that. But yeah, it comes up the most for hearing equipment. It really does.
Anything else for this afternoon, Ron?
No, I think we're probably at a good stopping point. Everybody stay dry.
Yeah, that's not going to happen.
Everybody stay safe.
So, Crystal, I just got a picture from Carrie, and she's down in the basement with 10 people still. Why'd you come up?
I'm a risk taker.
Nice. Well, living on the edge.
Yeah, exactly.
You were willing to put yourself at risk because the waiting discussion was so enthralling that you couldn't stay in the basement.
Exactly. That's exactly what happened. I could not wait to
Thank
get
you,
back up.
everybody. Stay safe out there.
Bye, everybody. Thanks.